You know what's funny? BookTube is a really strange place. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's weird, it's wonderful, it can be incredibly brilliant, incredibly inspiring. And then 5 minutes later it can feel unbelievably competitive. It's one of those corners of the internet where people genuinely love books, but sometimes we accidentally convince ourselves that every single thing we read needs to become content, or we only read for content, which is incredibly unhealthy. When you've been doing this a long time and you get a bit older, for me, I realise that a lot of my reading never appears on this channel. Some of my favourite books have never been mentioned in a video, and probably never will be. And it's not some millennial cringe books, or I think they're too intellectual, or too obscure, or whatever. They're just mine. And I think everybody deserves a little corner of their life that isn't constantly being turned into content. When I finish filming a video, I don't stop being someone who reads. Neither should you. I just become someone else who's reading for myself. If you walked into my house and ignored the bookshelves, you would probably be surprised. The stack of books next to my bed right now is books about Van Gogh, Frida Kahlo, Vivienne Westwood. In my ensuite bathroom, there is a biography of a Victorian opera singer that almost nobody has ever heard of, a collection of letters written by Wallis Simpson. None of those books have anything to do with BookTube. They're just things that I find interesting. I think I've inherited that from my mum. She was exactly the same. She read fiction, of course, but she also loved nonfiction. She'll disappear into biographies, history, memoirs, books about people who created things. Somehow I ended up exactly the same. I love reading about artists. Not just famous painters either, by the way. I love reading about fashion designers, photographers, film directors, architects, people who made something that only they could have made. And my favourite books are often the least polished ones. I love reading letters, diaries, journals, collections of interviews, articles, the things they actually wrote with their own hands. There's something incredibly intimate about reading someone's letters. You're not reading someone's carefully constructed image for publicity. You're seeing how they fought when nobody imagined millions of strangers would one day read these books and these words. That's what's interesting. I don't necessarily want another book explaining why Van Gogh mattered. I'd rather read Van Gogh explaining Van Gogh, and there's not many of those in the world. That's infinitely more interesting than another biography. It's funny because YouTube naturally puts people in boxes. I'm the book guy, which, to be fair, is fair enough. Yes, I am. But you get put in a box. But people don't necessarily know that I paint or draw. They don't know that I take photographs. I have a hobby of film photography. They don't know how many books I own about photography alone, or design, or fashion history, or art movements. I've got coffee table books that actually get used as books. They don't just sit there looking pretty for aesthetic photos on Instagram. They've got notes in them and bookmarks, and pages are a little bit worn, and one of them has coffee stains because they're genuinely lived books. One of my favourites is a huge photography book about Argentina. All different photographers across history, from the birth of photography to when the book was published. Giving their notes, their accounts, their letters, their thoughts, with their pictures. I'd happily spend hours just looking through that. There's no agenda, no review, no notes, no nothing, just looking. And I love that. When I was 18, I went to study art. And if I'm honest, I found a lot of it painfully repetitive. Everybody seemed, and everything we did was recreating someone else's work most of the time. Paint yourself like this artist, now do it like this artist, now do it again. The amount of times I did my self-portrait in the style of Andy Warhol is ridiculous, and I love Andy Warhol. It became an exercise in imitation, but there was something brilliant about my college. And this is where things got interesting for me, because while everyone else was worried about assignments and all of this, I was just wandering around pulling books off shelves, reading about artists' lives, looking through old catalogues, reading interviews, trying to understand why people made the thing they made. That curiosity has never left me. Even now, when I go to an art gallery, yes, I look at the sculptures, the art paintings, whatever, but eventually I'll end up in the gift shop looking for books, without fail. Sometimes I'll spend longer in there than I do in some of the shows, because I want to know the story behind the work, I want to know the context, I want the sketches, letters, I want to see the failures. I want to know what happened in someone's life while they were creating something. And that's probably why I enjoy books like this so much. People often genuinely ask me why I read so much history. And the answer is this. And we live in this weird timeline of books where, why would I read a fantasy novel inspired by a historical event when I can read about the actual historical event? Why stop at a fictional version? Give me both. Give me the novel, but give me the diaries, the articles, the memories, the memoirs, the eyewitness accounts, if there are any. I want the whole picture. That's how my brain works. One book leads to another, then another, then another. It's like following little threads that never really end, sometimes through time. And none of this is particularly useful for BookTube. Who's clicking on Darv Reed's Victorian opera singer biography? Probably about 16 people, 15 of which who were related to the person. That's okay. Not everything has to be a video. Not everything has to become a niche. Not every passion has to be monetized. Too many people do that. It just becomes content for content's sake. I actually think we're living through this weird blip in humanity where people feel pressure to share absolutely everything. Every hobby, every meal, every opinion, every book, every fault. How many people overshare on TikTok? How many people post the most intimate aspects of their lives on the internet? That's not good for you, and that's not good for the people watching, because most of them are enjoying it for the wrong reasons. Sometimes it's nice just to keep something for yourself. Some books don't need a review or a rating. Some books don't need a thumbnail with a surprised face on it and that god-awful font. Some books simply need to be read quietly, without anybody else's expectations, opinions, whatever attached to them. And maybe that's one of the healthiest things I've learned over the past few years. I don't owe the internet every part of myself. Neither do you. I don't know every film. You don't know every film that I watch. You don't know every painting I love. You don't know every photographer that inspired me. You don't know every writer that I love. You don't know every book I've ever finished. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. I think it's better to leave some things that are still mine, and I think more people need to do that. The internet already knows enough about us. It doesn't need absolutely everything. So, yeah, I'm always going to make videos, let's be real, I love it. I'm always going to talk about novels, classics, fantasy, literary fiction, commentary on community stuff is fun. Whatever I'm excited about. But somewhere in this house, there is a pile of books about artists, forgotten actresses, photographers, obscure historical figures, and handwritten letters that nobody asked me to read. And I'm perfectly happy just sitting there with a cup of coffee, disappearing into those pages, with absolutely no intention of making a video or talking about them anywhere other than in my head. Some parts of my reading life are worth protecting, and some parts of yours are worth protecting. They're personal. They should stay that way. And I think every reader deserves to have a few shelves that purely are theirs. That's it. So I'm going to leave this here. I'm Darv James. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, hype this video, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. And if you want podcast, exclusive content, and early access, please consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member. I'll see you guys in the next one.